All right. And actually, we'll see if I can go board editor so I can go back to it. Beautiful. That is wonderful. Playing. What's Timberlake up to? 2064. My man.
All right, Matt, you're live.
Okay. Lovely. So, what I wanted to go over today is some basic strategies concerning passed pawns. So, this first position is going to show two aspects of the passed pawn, which is support. This means the side that's actually has the passed pawn, which in this particular position is black, versus blockade, which is what white is going to do to any passed pawn. Now, you may have heard the old phrase from Nimzovich that says, passed pawns are a criminal and they need to be put under a lock and key. I don't think that goes far enough. And so I'd actually like to re-quote this particular thing and say that passed pawns are the enemy of your life and they ought to be killed. And without doing this and not killing your opponent's passed pawns creates more problems for yourself. Okay, now, of course, as you guys all know, a passed pawn is any pawn that has no pawn directly in front of it or on the side of it that can be captured. So this means if there was a pawn on c2 or a pawn on e3, for white, this pawn on d5 would not be passed because once it starts trundling up the board, white has the ability to capture this thing. So a passed pawn has to have total clearance of all enemy pawns. So even though the opponent's pieces can stop this here and here, this guy is still considered a passer. Now, passed pawns, the reason why they need to be killed and why they are the enemy of your life is for the simple reason that they are future queens. There is an old Russian proverb that says, you must kill your enemy before he is born. And that is exactly what killing passed pawns is doing. You are killing the pawn before it has a chance to become a queen and cause you checkmating problems. Okay, now one of the strengths, the major strength of a passed pawn is when it is supported or defended, especially if it's defended by a rook and it's behind the pawn. So this way, as the pawn starts going up the board, the rook is constantly guarding it. So it needs to be behind the pawn in order to do this. If the rook somehow manages to get in front of the pawn, it is still supporting the pawn, but it is in the way. So as the pawn starts marching up the board, at some point it wants to get past the rook on d3, but then the rook has to move. As soon as the rook has to move, then there is no more support. And once a passed pawn starts losing support, and this is something that you have discovered, Ori, in your games, is that if you don't support passed pawns can be picked off very easily, and therefore you lose the treat of having that future queen. So in this position here, what we have is a rook supporting, we have a bishop supporting, and we have a knight supporting. So this is an extremely strong passed pawn. The king can also come in and help out. Okay, now, so once you have sufficient support, then the pawn is enough of an irritant for your opponent that they have to do something about it. They cannot ignore this pawn ever. So the correct way to not ignore a passed pawn is through blockade. Blockade is putting something directly in front of the pawn, such as this move. Like this. This puts the knight directly in front of the pawn. The pawn cannot move. The knight also basically cannot move as well unless you want to lift the blockade for some reason. But this knight has a nice job where he is not only blocking the pawn, but he's still radiating power beyond this. This is why the knight typically is the best blockader of passed pawns, is because the knight reaches behind the pawns. You can imagine that if we use the bishop for this reason, the bishop still reaches beyond the pawn, but of course only on on these squares. Although possibly this won't matter. they can radiate power because the bishop's job is to blockade. A rook blockader, however, is a lot weaker because the rook does not reach beyond the pawn. It can only just stop where the pawn goes to. So rooks are typically the weakest blockader there is. Kings are also can be good blockaders, but since check forces movement, if you are blockading a pawn with the king, the next check will force you to unblockade. So a king is oftentimes a very weak blockader too, unless you have to do it. Okay, now another reason why you definitely want to blockade past pawns is because of the power of your opponent's pieces behind it. So for example, let's say, for some reason, white played king g2 in this position. Here, even though white is guarding this square twice, actually, we could even make it more pronounced. We could even have it where white plays this so this knight isn't pinned to the king. But in this position, there are certain cases where you actually can expand with your passed pawn like this. And even though white can capture this guy, the bonuses of now having a bishop raking down the board and the knight being able to jump into certain squares now could increase the power of the pieces that are supporting the passed pawn. So this is why you want to block. Another reason why you want to blockade the pawn is so this way the pieces become weaker. Okay, now having said that, let's edit the board again, and let's have one pawn here, one king here, and I think this king was here. And we go like this. Okay. Now, and let's triangulate here because it was actually black to move in this position. So let's see. So let's go like this, here, this, here, this, and it was black to move. Now, if you remember this position, Ori, I think this was your position against Jude. One of the times when you actually had played an extremely good game, you achieved this as a winning position.
Yeah.
Something like this.
Yeah.
And maybe your king was even on. I think your king was on b6. So actually, let me triangulate again here. Let's see. So it'd be like this, this here. Okay. So with you to move. So your king was here. Now in this position, you have the passed pawn like this, but another aspect of a passed pawn is that you not only need support, sometimes you need a shepherd, just like a field, just like sheep and stuff like that need a shepherd so that they can, the shepherd is designed to protect the sheep and to direct the sheep where they need to go. In chess, a lot of times you need a shepherd for your passed pawns. You can't just let your sheep run down the board because the wolf is going to come over and eat it. And as a matter of fact, in this particular game, I think you played a6, actually forgetting that pawns actually go 2 on their first try. And then when you went for this race, you discovered that you weren't getting there in time, and he actually managed to capture you. Now, so the correct procedure most of the times. Now, first of all, if you had actually gone 2 on this turn, do you actually win this race here? I don't think so. I think he catches you anyway. So even if you had gone 2, he still catches you at the end. So running the pawn down the board is never the correct idea. The correct idea is to shepherd the pawn, which means to actually pave the way for the pawn to go. So in these positions, the correct move is to play king b5. And when the king starts to run in, we could even play king c4 and push him out this way. And once the white king gets something like this, then we could start pushing the pawn, and this king will always be able to help out. Now, it's true that white can try to come around here, but the correct move in this position is just to play king to b2, and now the king has shepherded the pawn, the way is paved, and there is no way you can stop this guy from going. Okay, so shepherding is a huge part of promoting passed pawns, and a lot of times you have to have a shepherd for it, because if not, then the passed pawn is kind of overextended and easy to get. Okay, now board editor again. Now this time we will set up something different here. We'll what I like to call the water balloon. And we need kings, right? So let's go here, and we'll just give a king something like this. It does not really matter. Okay, so here I call this guy here the water balloon, the D5. So this holding on to a water balloon, you can drop it down the board whenever you want. This in the chess books, this is called a protected passed pawn. This means it is protected by a pawn. Like, for example, in this position, if we play king to e4, this does not make this a protected passed pawn, even though it is protected. Protected means that it's protected, it's covered by another pawn, and this d5 pawn is a huge treat in chess, huge, because not only do you have a passed pawn that your opponent has to worry about for the rest of the game, it's guarded by the weakest unit that you have, which is a pawn, which means any big piece that you have left is now free to do whatever you want. So this means, so like, for example, since this pawn's covered, this king could now run over to here and try to take this guy, because we don't have to worry about the D pawn anymore. He's already protected. If we wanted to, we could try to run this way and come up the board, and we still won't have to worry about the D pawn, because he's protected forever. Now, the one drawback to this, of course, is that if at some point, let's see, back up here, you simply play d6. Now, all of a sudden, your pawn is passed, but he has to be able to have time to run down the board, or else your water balloon is going to get popped, but not in your favor. The king is just going to come here, take the pawn, and suddenly, you'll have less of a good position there. So you have to drop the water balloon at the correct time. You can't just drop it at the first opportunity. You have to clear the way. So this means, like, say, somehow if you could drag the king way over here, or somehow if you could drag the king way down here, then you could drop your water balloon and you'll win all races. Okay, now, okay, so these type of passed pawns are the strongest when they're protected by other pawns. Okay, now, of course, having multiple pass pawns is a huge treat, but okay, let's go back to the board editor and to the most basic of all pass pawn positions. And I know we've gone over this before, but I'm going to do it. We'll do it like this, and we'll go here. Continue analysis board. Okay, so in this position, with this particular pass pawn, this guy definitely needs a shepherd. And whenever you have a pass pawn and your opponent has their king in front, you have to actually shepherd the pawn and clear the way first before you even move this guy. Here in this kind of position, if you end up pushing the pawn first and trying to promote this guy, you actually give up a draw right on this move, when black can just simply play king to e6. And I'll show very quickly how to draw this position. Usually the policy here is always stay in front of the pawn. If you cannot stay in front of the pawn, then stay in front of the king, and this will draw you the game. So since here both of the guys are lined up, the correct move is here, staying lined up. Let's move the king this way. We stay in front of the king, check, here, here, and again, since they're all lined up, we stay in front of both. Let's try going this way this time. King here, check, and then in this position, this is a stalemate, and black draws. Okay, so going back to the beginning here, the correct way to get this guy to become a queen is you have to clear the way first. So the correct move here is to grab opposition. King to d5. This forces the king to go somewhere. If the king stays in front of the pawn, then we still push him around. We actually get in front of our own stupid little pawn here, because what we're doing is we're trying to push this king to the side, here or here. If we play, let's play king f7 here. Now this abandons the e7 square. So again, we start heading towards promotion by guarding the queening square. So this pawn's going to morph on this square on e8. So we have to guard the square. So the king is going to do this. Now the only way to prevent, let's see, king d7 is the threat, and then the pawn will be able to go because it's totally covered. So we have to play king to e8, and again, we do not push the pawn at this time. What we do is we take control of the queening square first. So black can either go here or here, it doesn't really matter. once we play this move, now the next 4 moves are plop, plop, fizz, fizz, and we get a queen by force. Just to show it, king here, pawn up. King can go anywhere he wants. It doesn't matter. Pawn up. King can go wherever he wants. Pawn up. King can go back to try to stop something, but this is just a queen. And by shepherding and clearing the way first, you can win this game every single time. Okay, now, okay, so with those things in mind, let us back to the key game of all, well, yeah, the key game that happened yesterday. So we'll go over here. This was yesterday. Where are we here? 27 hours ago. That's bullet chess. That doesn't do it. Natalie Sanjay. Here it is. Okay. Now, we'll get to the key moment here in this game when we start. So it was the end game, and you had this. You got this pass pawn. Okay. Now, so here's the first critical moment of the game when you played c6, creating a pass pawn. Now, so from Sanjay's point of view, this guy is the enemy of his life. Killed. He has to do something about this. So typically, whenever a passed pawn gets formed, the good move is to play rook to c8, and this way the pawn is immediately hit. Although white can give himself a water balloon by actually protecting this guy, but usually you turn your attention to the passed pawn immediately. Okay, so here he does not do this. He actually plays rook to e5. You took once. And I was wondering if even taking twice was just immediately decisive, because you'll have a protected pass pawn here, and he can never abandon this with his king. His king would have to sit here and babysit that forever. So that was probably winning at once, going right into a pawn endgame. Okay, but you did the next best thing, which is to support your pass pawn. So now he is protected. So he immediately turns to his attention to it, and then you played this move. Now this guy is protected, but there is a nifty little factor here, and that is because this guy is guarded, you are now free to do something else with this rook. This rook does not have to guard this guy anymore, but this guy still has to remain here. So what this means is that the correct move here is rook to d1, and he could practically resign, because you're playing rook to here, you're going to take, you play rook to b7, take this guy, and he can't do anything about this. His rook is too good. He can't move his rook and try to do something counter, because you've got the water balloon. You can just drop it on him if he starts to run away. So this is the great thing about support of a passed pawn by another pawn, is that your big pieces suddenly increase in strength many times. Okay. So, but what happened here? So king f1, so you did the next best thing, which is to get the king into the center. Here, and again, you still have rook to d1, but you brought your king into the center. Now his king is in the center, and you tried to pick on this fact, and he almost mated himself. Here, king c2, here, this. So his king is really good, so he wasn't quite mated. Now your rook is actually much more passive than before, and his king is actually much better than before. But your water balloon still remains, so he can't do anything too froggy yet. He starts to try to do something on this side of the board, but I think that just weakens all these pawns. So something like rook g1 is probably pretty good here. Check. Here. Now again, this check was probably winning, because you're still playing rook to d7. Here, take. This. So he does this in such a way that he allows your king in. However, he does have this check, so this wasn't immediately losing for him. That, however, is immediately losing, because now you have multiple pass pawns. Okay, so this should be winning pretty easily. Here comes the pawn check. Here, rook c8. Again, he has to maintain this blockade, or else you're going to drop the water balloon on him. So the rook is really bad. Now, eventually, you found rook to d1, and you eventually found rook to d7, and you eventually found here, which should be winning at once after this move. Because in this position, all you really have to play is this, and he can resign. This is mate, and there's nothing he can do about it. So that was winning. Now, actually, there was something else I didn't say in the basic lesson, which I'll go to in a second here once we get to it, and that is what the concept of candidates. A candidate pass pawn is a pawn. Well, actually, Sanjay's going to get one here pretty soon, but the let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Let me get a different board here because we'll go back to this in a second because this is actually really important. Board editor here. Let's clear the board. Okay, so let's put one pawn here, one pawn here, one pawn here, and we'll put the kings way over here so it doesn't really matter. Let's go like this. Okay, like this. Okay, in this position, there is another concept known as a candidate. So in this case, the candidate pawn would be the h5 guy. He is not a passer because this pawn on g3 can stop him. But because the candidate has what we call a helper in the form of Gary here, this means that he can create a pass pawn if there is nothing directly in front of the h pawn. So here, even if white tries to run, black will play this move and create himself a pass pawn. So on capture, capture, there's your pass pawn. He just runs down the board. Now, one mistake that could be made in this position in some cases is to not push the candidate pawn when you're trying to get a passer, but push the helper pawn like this here. This sometimes can be extremely weak because now all of a sudden the candidate pawn is stuck, and it is true that you can actually push this pawn on the next turn, but when they capture and give you a pass pawn, you also give them a pass pawn. And this is one of the principles that should be used by all chess players, which is to never, ever, ever give your opponent a pass pawn if he does not have one or cannot earn one. You don't want to gift them one because that will immediately be disastrous. And usually the instinct should be not to actually give your opponent pass pawns. So now, having said that, going to this game here, this is actually what happened. Now, in this position, instead of playing rook h7 and going for the mate, what you did is you pushed your other pass pawn, but this guy doesn't have adequate support. He does at the moment, but on the next move, which was this, suddenly his support is going to totally disappear. So after take, 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 now the pass pawn doesn't even exist. Now your water balloon still exists. So this means you are still winning the game. But the key was this position here. Now, in this position, the way to think of it is that black has a candidate in the form of the G pawn. So what we want to do is we want to take in such a way that we never, ever, ever give them a pass pawn. So therefore, the correct move in this position is to take with Freddy. This does not give him a pass pawn in any way. And even if black takes, black no longer has any more threats, and this game is over. In this particular game, what happened is that the rule of capturing towards the center was obeyed, and even though it looks like that if black takes we end up in the same position, what has happened, however, is that black was suddenly gifted a pass pawn, and once this happened, this is losing. Now, even if you try to promote your own guy, once this happens and the blockade happens, suddenly black wins, just like that. So the idea here is that you never, going back to the end there, after you made a queen, resigns happen. You never, ever, ever give them a pass pawn. And actually, you guys want to see a horror story here? This actually happened. That I think it was 2 summers ago at the Seattle Chess School. There was an all-week chess camp, and it featured the Alexander brothers, James and Gabriel. Beck Mueller was there. Kason was there. Max was there. And what happened, there was a game where this type of thing was featured, and it was really unbelievable. It was something very similar to this. king here, king like this. White might have had like a pawn here like this, and a pawn here like this, and this was the actual with black to move. This was a practice game between Beck and James Alexander, and Beck had, who was playing white, played his favorite Gocho piano and played it really, really badly, and obviously blundered into a totally losing position. And notice here on the king side that we actually have the same pawn formation that Ori had versus Sanjay. So again, the correct move here, it was actually black to move. So we'll triangulate here. So this becomes so. So in this position, it was black to move. And black. So here again, we have the same thing where if you take with the H pawn, the H pawn starts running up the board. In this particular game, believe it or not, white actually won this game. And all black has to do in this position is just simply take, and James wins easily. And there's really no extra fight. Instead, James played like 10 unbelievable blunders in a row and actually allowed this pawn to capture here and queen on top of all that, and ended up losing, and white Beck ended up winning this game, and this game totally drove me insane. I don't know if I've ever been as so flustered by a game as this position. And when this sort of pawn thing happened yesterday in that game between Ori and Sanjay, it reminded me of this. And so evidently it's something that players haven't encountered before. So just to let you know, whenever white tries this last, or whichever color is trying this, whichever side is trying this last chance attack with G6, the correct way to stop this is just simply take twice, but you take first with the F pawn. You take like this, you take like this, and you have no more problems, and you win every game. Yeah, something. It was something like check, and then the queen got lost, and then it was something like this take, and he didn't even take with check. He did something like this, and then this happened, and this was queening by force, and it was just it was so disgusting. It was hard. It was hard to deal with. Anyway, so, but that's about all I can say about passed pawns. Like I said, when your opponent gets them, they are the enemy of your life, and they ought to be killed. And when you get them, they are the treat of chess, because it's a future queen. It paralyzes your opponent's pieces. It usually paralyzes all of your opponent's pieces in order to try to stop this guy. So getting one passed pawn is good. Then that means getting multiple passed pawns is even better. So it's a major strategy in this game, and you have to be able to know how to deal with them, and to know what to do when you have them. Shepherding, support of the passed pawn, all that kind of stuff. Actually, speaking of that, Sydney and I played a game the other passed pawn that I think this this strategy came up, where I think my rook was in front. Let's see, where here they are. Let's see, it was this. So let's go to the ending here, like this. Oh, we got to flip the board here. How do we flip board? Flip the board, flip the board. Here we go. Okay, so this was the position. So we'll back up a few moves here, like this. Okay, so in this position, when my passed pawn started up the board, it turns out that my rook was in front of it. So this is somewhat weak, of course. So she does the correct thing and gets behind the passed pawn, and I have to get out of the way, but I have to do it slowly. So this is another thing that happens with passed pawns. Okay, yeah, now here she was trying to make some pawn attack on this side of the board. And so what we do is we're just simply crawling up the board one square at a time. Same with this move. Same with this move. Here we exchange pawns first and then go to A8, and here resign. But what would have been interesting is to see how maybe not interesting, but might be instructive to know how do we actually promote this pawn when this rook is in front. The answer is actually quite simple. So even if she just delays a move, we can push this pawn because we are protecting it in two different ways. And then after some move, all we simply have to do is move the rook. We can go here, we can go here, we can go here, we can go to any of these places since the bishop is guarding the pawn. And then on the next move, we get to promote. Now, sometimes this isn't the case, though. So let's say I blundered my bishop. Let's make it black's move. It is black's move. So let's say you go here, and let's say I blundered the. I'll make a couple of bad moves just to show my point here, like this. Okay, now here we have a slightly different situation that comes up quite a bit, where the rook is behind the passed pawn, but the rook is in front of it, but we don't have a rook move, because on any rook move, say like this, our pride and joy gets killed. And so we can't do that. So in some cases, what we need to do is give a check. So, like for example, let's say that black had blundered a couple of moves. Let's say black had played here. Then on this we'll blunder. We'll make some reciprocal blunders here. In this position, black's king is exposed to a check. So the correct way to promote the pawn is to give a check like this. When the king gets out of check, we promote, and our rook is protecting. So this is how we have to promote. So this means that so the other side, to survive this, you need to have your king in a good spot. No, let's let me show you that one. So let's set this position up again. Let's actually go like this. Here. Let's see. We want to set a position up here. So we're just going to make some blunders here. Take no. Let's take like this here. Let's take like this and here and here. Okay, so this is what I just want to. It's like this. So just to show the correct way to defend against a rook in front of a passed pawn. So if you happen to have the other side where you have the defending king, the correct way to defend this position is to either have the rook on g7 or h7. This will prevent the rook from checking you. So this means in this position, if white gives a check and we take, suddenly the rook is still defending the pawn. So this doesn't work very well. If your king is sitting on g7, like say you're going here, you get the same thing, because on rook to g8 we can just take and there's no promotion. The troubling part is if you are on something other than g7 or h7. Like for example, if you go to h7, or excuse me, if you go to f7, this is actually losing, because now white plays rook to a8 and this is threatening to promote. And if black takes the passed pawn, thinking that he's out of trouble, this check suddenly wins the rook. So this is all a very common little trick here. So in order to defend yourself, you have to stay here or here, and you are basically rooted to those two squares for the rest of the game. You can't ever move the king, because anything else is just going to allow a check. So this is how you deal with the passed pawn in this kind of situation. All right. So that was is like I said, just to review, the passed pawns, the treat of chess, if you have them, they're the enemy of your life. If you don't, you should blockade them. If you don't have one, you should support them. If you do, shepherd if you can. If you can protect it with a pawn, that's the best of all, because then you can hold on to that passed pawn and drop it whenever you want, whenever it's safest. And yeah, and that's like I said, that's a major strategy in chess, and it happens every single time a passed pawn shows up. Actually, maybe we could get some more specific examples. Since you won this tournament today, Ori, let's see if a passed pawn actually occurred in any of the games today. So here you have some passed pawns. Steve. So let's see here. Let's go through the game until we get to a passed pawn here. Let's see. So here we're just exchanging
This game, I think.
this.
I lost this.
Black resigned. Now, actually, I thought you were close to winning this game. You have
I
a
was
pretty sizable.
playing clumsy. The tournament was over, and I was focusing on something else.
Actually, this looks crushing here. Here, and then we have tactic trainer time. Fork. And now you're up like a million pawns, and then you have a passer in the form of Eddie. So that would win. E5 is probably also okay. There, I think you can just simply play knight takes followed by queen takes, and that wins another pawn, and he can't castle, so that was winning. Take. Okay, so now he actually has reorganized himself. Okay, then you got your queen pinned. Okay, so probably no pass pawn. Okay, you actually did get a pass pawn here. So let's see if you get to make use of this. Check. Oh, he exchanges down, and he goes for the attack. Oh, and he gets to win your rook. Okay, so on, but you didn't get to make something of it. This one here looks like there was pass pawns all over the place. So let's see how happy. Take. So we're going for a quick end game. Oh, this is the one where he went for the wrong pawn here and got himself forked, and then he traded down. Okay, now here it's white that has a pass pawn. So this is also a water balloon because it's protected. So true. So this could be quite dangerous for him. Now, if your knight was protected, you might even have a mating net, but you have to back up. And here, okay, so here he could have got his pass pawns going if he wanted to. Here he makes a trade, which makes this guy not a pass pawn anymore, which is kind of funny because he's got a 5-3 majority on one side of the board, but no passers. And he's got no passers over here. So that's actually quite good for you at the moment. So here you got to outpost your knight. Okay. And you're doing a good job of blockading. Your king is blockading this pawn. That's good. This check, I think, picks up a pawn here and makes a passer out of Harry. So again, this is another thing about pass pawns is that you want to play for them. Actually, is this a trap?
Wins a pawn.
Is this? I wonder if this is a trap. Trap. Is this a trap? Here. This might be a draw. So you are correct not to take h3. That's a trick.
H6
he can't do
wins.
that. Yeah, no, you're correct. And it's a retreating knight move attack stuff, which is another strategy altogether. We'll cover that some other day. So yeah, knight h6 was a high-class move. This wins a pawn. Now you fork, and now you have a passer. So here we have the first passer of the game. So let's see what you do with him. So you try to win this guy, try to make connected passers, which is a double huge treat. But here, now you see here we have a candidate. There's nothing in front of him, and he's got a helper. So in some cases, he's threatening to move down the board and give himself a passer. And in fact, he does this now. Very good. Take. And so, but he does not have adequate support. So you go for the immediate blockade. Now you're blockading. Excellent. And he tries to run, but you go and you kill him. Excellent. That's perfect. Okay, but he still has a candidate in the form of Charlie here. So the game's not quite over, but you've got pass pawns galore. So you push the most outside one. That's good. Go pawn, go pawn, go pawn, go. Check. Okay, so you blockade him, although now you lose a knight, but this doesn't matter anymore. You got a queen, and you went on to win. So here I would say that you not only dealt with his pass pawns correctly, you used yours correctly. So that's in there. And look what happens when you do that. You win the game. Now this game here, I can see right away there is no pass pawn. Looks like a queen just got blundered. Oh, that was the game of mutual blunders there. So here... the Queenie Bunny game has Queenie Bunny game. This might have pass pawns. Let's just check it out here. And again, we have the knight c6 defense.
I gotta go, Matt. Thanks for the lesson, though.
All right, or yeah. So hopefully that'll. All right, so
all right.
we'll
see you guys
take.
Tomorrow.
Yep, we will see you tomorrow. Bye, Ori. And pass pawn. Look at this. So we got a pass pawn, and what does Andrew do? He blockades it immediately. Good, excellent. Excellent. So somewhere around here, I actually stopped watching this game because I thought Ori was losing, but he came back and won. So here, the passed pawn was immediately destroyed. You can actually take it like this. He can even take it like this if he wants. He chose to exchange rooks first. So now Black has got a candidate passed pawn, and he should be winning here. Yeah, and like here, probably Rook C5 was just winning easily. But okay. Now, by the way, notice here, when it came to pushing these pawns, notice that Andrew did not play his candidate right away. He played his helper right away. This will allow White to play A4 and stop up the pawns in some cases. So I would say that A5 is already somewhat bad technique here. So now he's getting his candidate going, but he's losing this guy. All right.
Wait, I don't understand why pushing the helper is bad.
Okay, well, I'll show you on the board editor after. Let's see, this. So now his rook's getting trapped. That's not a good move. He should have played rook somewhere else, anywhere but that. Actually, G4 wins the rook. So this is a very bad rook. Take. Okay, but he's still getting his candidate going. And now he's trying. Okay, so again, he's getting his help. He's getting his guy going, and he has support, which is excellent. But now he's getting his pass pawn going, and he's got a passer. What does Ori do? He immediately turns his attention to it. Excellent. This is good. This is excellent. G6 trying to undermine that support. Good move by Andrew. Take, and the support is undermined. So both sides are playing wonderfully here. They're dealing with passed pawns in an absolute good way. Okay, so this is just basically heading towards a draw, except somewhere around here, Andrew really wanted to lose his rook. Yeah, here he went like this. There was no reason for that. He just takes, and that's he could just go here, and that's draw. Draw. Okay, so the question was, why is pushing the helper bad? No. We want
Yeah, just in that one position that you showed.
board editor. Okay, well, because here's the thing, and this is just generally. Let's put a pawn here. Let's put a pawn here. No, not there. Let's put a pawn here. Let's put a pawn here, and we'll put the king somewhere close by, and we'll go like this, and we'll go like this. Okay. So here we have the candidate. There's no pawn in front of this guy, but there's a pawn in front of him. Whenever you choose to push the helper up the board, even in any specific position, pushing the helper up the board allows your opponent to play a move like this, and in order to get this H pawn to become passed, you actually have to play G4 at some point. Now, in that exact position, the black king was near enough by that he wasn't going to suffer, but it's a good habit forming move, in my opinion, to play a move like this and get your pawns going in a correct way, because this type of thing is going to happen game after game after game, and if you get into the bad habit of pushing a move like this, then one of these days this H5 move is going to be very good and blockade the passed pawns. Now, like I said, though, if White ever does play G4 and Black takes, White will suddenly have a passed pawn, but then again, so does Black. So in certain situations, this type of thing is not going to be healthy. So the good habit-forming move for all chess players is to always move the candidate first, and then you will never have this. This will never become a problem. You know, they could play H5 all they want or whatever, but they're never going to get a chance to get a passed pawn, and you will have every chance of getting a passed pawn. That's the best way I could answer that. So, all right, well, and so it looks like that even in spite of not seeing that lesson or two passed pawns, two games with passed pawns, and did a reasonably okay job with them. So that's good to see.
I really appreciate the lesson on the rooks, where you have how do you promote when you have a rook in front of your pawn. I was meaning to ask you about that.
Yeah, because that is a very common occurrence in chess. That's not a rarity. That happens all the time. So you have
Yeah,
to.
it happens all the time. I'm always like stuck with my rook blocking my passed pawn, and I'm like, what do I do now? I always end up losing it.